Hello and welcome to GrossiMath.com, where math is for everyone. Today we're going to be solving question 4 from the 2017 Algebra 1 STAAR using the TI-Nspire calculator. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I see is it says here the graph of a function. So we'll circle that. Remember, when we see an equation with the TI, we should be happy we can work. Was transformed to create the graph of, and here is another function. Okay. Which of these describes this transformation? Okay, so here I can see in my answer choices that it talks about horizontal. Remember, horizontal means, of course, side to side. Okay, and then it also talks about vertical, a vertical shift. Vertical shift means up and down. Okay, and here it talks about, well, it shifted by 4,096 units. That's a lot, or 4,096 units. And then this one says, okay, so it shifted to the left, or it shifted down, or it shifted up, or it shifted to the right. Now, shift means moved. So did it go to the left by 4,000 units? Did it go up by 64 units? That's our question here. Okay? And, excuse me. Basically, what is a unit? Well, a unit, the way that these problems work is that you would have a graph, right? And let's say I draw a graph right here. And it's crossing the y-intercept there. And let's say now I graph a second graph, and I think of it that the first graph turned into the second graph. Okay, so it's sort of, that's why they call it a transformation, transformed. It's kind of like Optimus Prime. He starts out as a truck, he turns into a robot, right? Or he starts out as a robot and turns into a truck. And how would you describe that? Well, I just did. He changed into a truck, he changed into a robot, right? Well, here, this line number 1, changes into line number 2. And the question is, how many units did it move by? Well, in this case, it moved up, because it went from line number 1 to line number 2 would be a move up. And how many units? Well, units are the little tick marks on a graph. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and let's say 8. Okay, so here we saw that it shifted up 8 units. Okay, and see, those little lines are called units. Okay, so let's do this in the calculator and make this an easy problem. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is turn on my zooming screen so that you guys can see everything very clearly. Okay, and let's do that by going to Control N. Oh no, wait a minute. Let's do this zooming screen first. There we go. Okay. And now you're going to press, of course, you push Control N, you're going to press no. And now we're just going to graph both of these. And the way to graph in the TI-Nspire is to use G. Okay, that is the graphing function. You're going to go to the graph. So you're just going to go to the graph. And here I see that I have letters and parentheses and more letters. Okay, so this is good practice for an important skill. This is called function notation. So the D parentheses E, that's called function notation. Letter, parentheses, letter. And look inside the calculator. I see that it has a letter, parentheses, and a letter. So basically all I need to do is take out that F1 and put in the letter D. And now it looks a lot like my paper. Now you changed one thing in the calculator. So these problems take a little practice because you change one thing in the calculator and you change one thing on paper. One thing in the calculator, one thing on paper. So here I can see that the letter X is in parentheses. And that's important because the letter X has to be the letter in the parentheses as far as the calculator is concerned. If you put a different letter in there, it's going to give you an error. The front letter you're allowed to change. I changed it to a D, and that's allowed. But if the calculator requires it, that means that I got to change this letter E right here to the letter X. And of course, if this E changed to X, guess what? That E also changed to X. And look, here I have more parentheses, so that's telling me change E to an X. And that means that this E also changes to an X. Okay, so now what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go back to our calculator. We're going to leave that alone, the X in the parentheses. Remember, that has to be there. And we're going to graph the first function, X squared. Okay, and we press Enter, and there's my first graph. Okay, now I'm going to graph the second function. So I press Tab to graph a second function. I go back. I change that F1 to the letter D. And now I'm going to change this to say parentheses x minus 64 parentheses squared. So you can see that first I graphed the first equation and second I graphed the second equation. So now I press enter on that and I'm going to see how did it change. Before I press enter, let me just say focus on this guy first because they're both going to be blue. That's a feature of the calculator I don't really like too much. They're both going to be blue, so make sure you look at it first and then press enter. Okay. So now, what happened there? Let's see. Okay, so what I did was I pressed enter and it seems to have moved and there's a blank screen. Well, don't panic when you see a blank screen all the time because, see, I just panicked a little bit and it even happens to me. It's okay to panic for a second, but then think, hey, if it's not on the screen, where could it be? It could be off the screen. So I need to zoom out. Menu, 4, and I'm going to zoom out. And you can see right here, look at that. Remember, we started with a graph that was literally right in the center of the graph. We started with a graph that was literally smack in the center of the graph. And now we have a graph that has moved kind of out to the right. And you can see right here behind me, let me move this out of the way so you can see, that that's very close to the number right there, says 78.81. So what do you think? I think that from the origin to this point right here looks like it's about 64. And guess what? It also moved, did it move left or right? Well, it moved to the right. So for our choices that are in front of us right now, we have a really easy choice to make. It moved to the right. So obviously there's only one. This one says left, out. This one says down, out. This one says up, out. This one says it moved to the right. Yay. Okay, so there we go. It moved to the right by 64 units. And that's why I pointed out that 78, because it's very close to 64. You know, obviously the graph is not at the maximum. The maximum out here is 78. This is a little less than 78, so 64. And that looks good. So that's probably about 64 boxes going from there to there, or exactly 64 boxes going from there to there. And there we go. That's what happened when I changed from this graph to this graph. Okay, so that's how you answer this type of question on your Algebra STAAR. I hope you learned something today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and to click the bell icon, and to visit the website where math is for everyone, www.grossimath.com.